Hello, this is Verity from Expert Agent and welcome to your video tutorial on adding existing lettings data into Expert Agent. So this video came about because we have a lot of agents joining us from existing systems and they need to get their lettings data into the system. So there's a couple of different ways of doing this. You can add all of your applicants, all of your properties and landlords, and then add all of your tenancies. But what we're going to do is actually just add a tenancy, and each point within the tenancy wizard you will be asked to add various information anyway, so we're doing it all in one go. It's just a little bit quicker. So hovering over tenancies and selecting add new tenancy there from the drop down. Step 1 asks you to select a property, so you click on the plus icon, and if you did have your property on the system already, you can search for it using the wildcard facility up in the top. Or down at the bottom, there's a little house with a plus icon giving you the option to add a new property at this point, which is what we're going to do. So I'm going to change the department there to lettings, and you can see when I change it to lettings, the vendor details changes to landlord details. So the address is just a case of a postcode lookup, and this is the address for the property. So typing in the postcode and waiting for that drop down to populate for Royal Mail. We're then going to add in the inquiry source, if you can remember it, and the inquiry method. Now you've got the option to search existing landlords, so again, if you'd already added in a landlord, you can add them in here to be the landlord for this property, or you can add in new landlord details as well. Setting the salutation field and adding in any email addresses, mobile number, home and work phone. Now my landlord lives at a different address to the property. If he didn't, obviously I would just leave that as it is and go on to the features tab, but I'm going to click on that box and do another postcode lookup for my landlord, and selecting which option from the drop-down menu there. If you wanted to add a second landlord at this point, you can by clicking on that button, and it will give you the option of adding in the second landlord details. Now if it's Mr. and Mrs. though, I would put Mr. and Mrs. in as one landlord. If it was two different landlords, for example, brother and sister own the property together, or in the case of a divorce or deceased estate or anything like that, then you can add them in as two separate landlords. I'm then going to go on to the features page. Now these are the features for the property. So obviously you will know a lot of this. So the property type is a house, the property style is detached, the property age is older, and the location is Green Park. It's a monthly rental of $8.50. And then you've got the option there of adding in your property features too, which are the essentials for lettings. Now, if you're not using essentials, then this will not be here for you to choose anything. And when you're using essentials, all you need to remember is tick as many as possible for the property and as few as possible for the applicant. So these are things that are deemed absolutely essentials from the applicant side of things. So if, for example, you've got an applicant who is on benefits, you will need to only send them properties that are suitable for benefits. If you've got an applicant with a pet, you only need to send them properties that are suitable for pets. So we're going to select which ones this property is suitable for. Put in there the number of bedrooms, reception rooms, and bathrooms, the size if you wanted to put in the square footage, and the tenure as freehold. Over on the right hand side, you've got the option of having what we call extra data questions. Now these are the extra data questions for lettings. Okay, so at this point we are asking whether the property, what the general condition is, again, different question, different way, same question rather, different way of answering it. So the reason why we've got those in there is just to show you the different types of questions that you can have. So a drop down, text fields and date fields. The last inspection date as well we'll put back to the 1st of May. No, we won't, we'll put it on the 28th of April. Moving on to the adverts and notes page. At this point, you can add in your adverts for the property if you wanted to. Obviously, if this is a let property, then you might not want to add in your adverts for it just yet. But having said that, you might want to add in your adverts so that when this tenancy comes to an end, you've got all of the information on there ready for you to remarket this property. It is entirely up to you at this point how much information you add in. So I'm just going to put in internal notes. Just for example, and then press the save button up at the top. That will add the property onto the tenancy wizard, and then we add in the tenancy details here. So the rent amount on the tenancy, the frequency, automatically charge rent. So this is with regards to lettings financials. Now, the training account has got lettings financials turned on. If you're using it, that's great, but you will have the option in the configuration of lettings financials to automatically charge rent, which has to be ticked. So therefore, on each tenancy, you can choose whether you are automatically charging rent on each tenancy or not. But the back end, the master switch in configuration needs to be ticked for that to happen. The management type is fully managed. It's 7.5 recurring management fee, 7.5%. The deposit amount's $850. It's held. The availability date, we're going to put it in as the move-in date, so it's the 1st of May. And the agreement type was a 6-month AST. And the negotiator was myself. And it creates your new tenancy. So you've got the details tab with all of the details that we added in the wizard. And then moving on to the tenants tab, we've got no tenants assigned to this tenancy yet. So at the bottom there, we've got the option to add a tenant. So we don't have a tenant assigned, so we need to assign one by clicking on the little plus icon under select tenant. And you've got the option of finding a tenant if you'd added the tenant in already, or the option to add a new tenant there. So we're going to add in the details of this tenant. You've got the option of adding an applicant too if it's, for example, Mr. Example tenant and Miss Example applicant who live together. You can add them in as the same sort of on the same applicant form. But if it's Mr. and Mrs., I would probably add them in as one applicant. If they have separate bank accounts, though, that the rent is coming out of separate bank accounts and they're splitting it equally, add them in as 2 separate tenants. The salutation, email addresses, mobile number, home and work phone. Over on the right hand side then, once you add in a mobile number and an email address, it will give you the option whether you want to send this applicant text messages, emails, the welcome email or the weekly email. Now if this is already an applicant who's registered with you, it probably registered on your old system, you might not want to send them the welcome email at this point, but I am going to carry on sending them the weekly email. I'm going to send them emails as in general and also give them the ability to send text messages. So the postcode lookup for the applicant is the same as the tenancy. So it's the address for the property, but you don't need to add that in at this point because once we go through the tenancy process, there will be an option of assigning the property address as the tenant's address. So we don't need to put that in yet. We'll just move on to the requirements tab and select lettings from the drop down on department. So you move on to the requirements tab, and again you don't have to add any of this information in at this point, but it will make it easier if this applicant decides to stay with you at the end of this tenancy and go into another tenancy or either renew. If they do then decide to go into another tenancy with another property, you can then match them out to 2 properties that they are suitable for their requirements. So if you can remember it, if you've got access to your old system, you can use those old systems to add in the requirements for this applicant. Okay, so the maximum price they were looking for was $850, and the match from and match to will populate for you 20% below, 10% above. When they were due off the mailing list, so what date you need to get back in touch with them, probably not that applicable for lettings applicants because you generally don't get in touch with them during the tenancy, only to book things in like property inspections and stuff like that. But you might want to put that forward so it's at the end of the tenancy or a month before, or maybe 2 months before the end of the tenancy, so you can get in touch with them there. Minimum bedrooms they were looking for was 2, and the maximum bedrooms they were looking for, they didn't really have a maximum, so I'm going to put that at 10. The required between and dates are for matching purposes. Now I'm going to leave those as they are, and then once this applicant starts looking again, then put new required between and dates in there. The property additional requirements there, I'm going to leave as they are. I'm not going to put any essentials in because I know this applicant doesn't have any pets and they're not on benefits. So unless they come to me once they start looking again and say, I really, really, really have to have a property with a garden, I'm not going to put any essentials in. And I'm going to leave it as the default locations because that's where they were looking, if I remember correctly, that's where they were looking when they first came to us 4 months ago when they first went on with this property. Previous landlord. Now, what you would have used the previous landlord for, obviously, is getting previous landlord references when they first came to you and when they first moved into this property. Now, that information will be on your old system. You can capture this here if you need to. If you know you're never going to get in touch with this landlord again, then there might not be any point. But if you just wanted to put the details in, then you can, obviously. So I am going to put this in. And put in the salutation there. And do a postcode lookup for his property. If it was a company let, you can put in the company name there and add any email addresses for him. A website if you need to, mobile number, work and home phone. And when you receive the references from them. So I'm going to put that back to sort of in the mid-April time, because that's when we receive the references from him. When you're adding in this applicant, what you need to remember is what data you need from them. So when they start looking again, if they start looking again with you, what information you need from them at that point. So if you need the previous landlord, if you need their details again, then add them in. If you don't add them in, just to save you time. So when you're adding in all of these existing tenancies, you don't have to be adding in everything that you don't need for later on. You're only adding in the information that you absolutely essentially have to have. Status and notes page there. Again, this information you can be adding in now if you want to. It doesn't take you that long if you can remember all of the information or if you've got it on your old system. But this is going to be useful once they start looking for properties again. So current position obviously is in rented. The working status is full-time. There are no pets. They were looking when they first came to us for 6 months. And if you can remember the inquiry source and method, then add that in now. You've got the own house page, and you can be using the own house page if you want to. The reason why you would have the own house page or using it for a lettings applicant is if they are coming to you from a sales property. Now, they might be coming to you from a sales property because they've sold their property or they are selling their property, and potentially you sold their property for them, and they were looking for rented because they weren't sure what kind of property that they wanted. So they went into rented to give the new owners of their property time to move in. So they went into rented to find their dream property. So that's why you would use that. If you know you're never going to use it, you don't have to. You can just skip out that tab and just press the save button up at the top. And that will take you back to the add tenant wizard. So there then you've got the option of adding in the rent amount for them, which is pulled through, and then the payment reference. And then press save. So that's added the tenant onto the tenancy. Now at this point, if Mr. Example tenant was was one of two tenants, for example, on this tenancy, you would have put his rent as 425, not 850, and then you've got the option there to add another tenant where you go through the same process, add that another tenant to the tenancy and put their rent as 425, which would equal up 850. So at this point then, quite quickly, you've got a property added, you've got a landlord added, and they will be separate to the property as well, so they'll be under the landlord grid as well. And you've got a tenant added, and you've got them all assigned to a tenancy. So within one go, we've done all four of those things. We've added a property, a landlord, a tenancy, and an applicant. So at this point on the tenancy, what you'll need to do is right-click, and you'll need to mark it as let. Now, normally what you would do is in the tenancy process, if you're starting this tenancy from new, when you're on with the expert agent, what you'll go through is various options. You'll manage the references, you'll mark it as reserved, you'll then go through the tenancy agreement process and record the meter readings and then mark it as let. Obviously, this tenancy is actually let already, so you don't need to go through all of those processes, we just need to mark this tenancy as let. So on the action menu, available from the right click of the mouse or the white list icon over on the right hand side, I'm going to scroll down to change status and not go through reserve tenancy. I'm going to go straight to mark as let. So it gives me various options at this point to change the property status to let, mark the applicant as an active, i.e. it doesn't get matches from us. When you mark them then as active again, it's going to then start sending that applicant the weekly email again. I'm going to update the applicant address with the property address. That's why I said it wasn't essential to add in the applicant address at that point, because during the tenancy process, you've got the option to update the applicant address with the property address, and then update the property occupier details with the lead tenant. Now, when you've got multiple tenants on a tenancy, it will give you the option of marking which tenant is the lead tenant. Then it will then update the property occupier details with that lead tenant. So the start date, I'm going to change the start date obviously to the 1st of May because that was the start date on this tenancy. And then the first rent due was the 1st of May as well. And the agreement sign date was the day before, so we'll go with the 30th of April. And the term expiry was 6 months. So it will be the 1st of October. References checked, we don't have a specific date on references checked, but it was around mid-April. And again, initial funds received, you need to change the dates on all of these. So we'll go with the 28th of April. Review or renewal date is actually today, so it's the 1st of September. I need to see whether they want to review or renew today. So it's probably a good time to do this anyway. And the next inspection due on the property is, we've just had it, so actually the next inspection is not due until the end date of the tenancy, which is the 1st of October. If you've got lettings financials switched on, you will have the option down at the bottom for next. If you haven't, you will have a save icon. And if you have lettings financials turned on, you've got the option there to charge rent, charge the deposit, or charge the initial fees. I'm just going to press the save button down at the bottom. So once you push save, it will then ask you to do your property board movements if you're using the board statuses within Expert Agent. Now obviously at this point, because the property is let, you won't need to be sending this board status request to your board contractor, so you can actually just close it down. So we've got then all of the relevant dates in here. None of the target dates are set because we weren't actually going through the correct tenancy process or the new tenancy process. We were just adding this on as an existing tenancy. So all of the relevant date fields are in here. The tenants are in here. You've got the ability to add maintenance jobs if necessary. That's covered on our lettings video. You've got the option to add in the utility providers as well, and that will pull through onto the property, or you can add them onto the property and it will pull through onto the tenancy. And then you've got your events tab as well. So everything you do with an Expert Agent is recorded and saved onto the events tab with a date and a timestamp for compliancy reasons. So my tenancy status now is let. as well, which means my property will be marked as let. My applicant is marked as inactive with the address of the tenancy, and the property occupier details have been marked with my tenant. So I've really helped myself in the future as well. So not just now in the present getting all my existing data into Expert Agent, I've helped myself in the future. So once Little Queen Oak is available to let again, I will have most of the details in Expert Agent. Once my applicant, Mr. Example Tenant, is ready to start looking at new properties, they will already be in the system. So I've added all of that relevant details into the system already. So if we look at each aspect of the tenancy in turn, first of all, clicking into the property. So from the information panel, you can click into the property. It is looking a little bit bare, especially on the presentation tab, because we don't have anything assigned yet. We haven't added in any properties, any property photos. We haven't added in any brochures or made it or set the street view or anything like that. And that's something that probably you'll do before this property gets marked as let again. So a couple of things to check on this property just to make sure it's pulled through property. You've got your landlord tab, and it's pulled through the landlord obviously because you added the landlord at the same time as the property. You just need to make sure that if there are multiple landlords that the split is correct, or your main landlord is set, and the landlord names box is pulling through the correct information. On your access tab, if you scroll down at the bottom left, you've got your tenant details have been added in as the occupier. So what you might want to do here is add any access notes, for example. So we'll put the alarm code in there because we know that from our old system. And where the panel's situated. Any viewing arrangements or anything like that. You've also got the option to add in new key details, so you can add in the key for this property. So it's number 17. It will tell you if the key number already exists, so you can press OK and overwrite it if you want to, or then obviously change the number. So you select that it's in the office and any notes about the keys, or press the Save button. So things like the match criteria tab, the adverts, star items, photos, floor plans, the EPC page, any brochures or anything like that, you don't need to add yet. Obviously, if you've got time, you can add all of that in, ready for remarketing, or you can do this just before the property is remarketed, so that all of the information on there when you remarket this property is correct and up to date. Onto the dates tab, only a couple of things to put in there are the safety expiry dates, or the expiry dates. So you can put the gas safety expiry date in there, ready for it to flag up for you when these dates are due to expire. So that will flag up on quick links for you. In the Utilities tab, you can note down the utility providers. As I mentioned, that will pull through onto the tenancy form for you. So you can click Add New Utility, select your provider, or select the utility type first of all, then select your provider by clicking on the plus icon and giving a search for them. If you've got them on your system, you do search. If you don't, you've got the option to add a new contact down at the bottom. And then we've got the account number, serial number, and you can add in your meter readings from when you did the meter readings when this tenant moved into the tenancy, if you into the property if you wish to. So you would add all of your utilities in there. Onto the maintenance tab, you've got the option of adding preferred contractors for the property. So you can add in things like your preferred plumbers. If, let's say, for example, the landlord's got a preferred contractor for this particular property, you can add them in. You can also add in maintenance jobs from here as well. So you might want to think about adding in any recent jobs that this property's had, just so you can keep an eye on them if it's a recurring issue. You can click Add New Maintenance Job there, and you would just select the progress status as completed. So you'd add the details of the job and select the progress status as completed, just so you can keep an eye on any of the recent maintenance jobs on this property. Nothing really to do on the tenancies tab, but your tenancy is sitting on that tenancies tab there. Now I have made some changes. There are pending changes to this record, so I can just save that one. So back onto the tenancy then, clicking into the landlord. So this is the landlord we added in the tenancy wizard. We assigned them to the property, but they are a separate landlord form. So you can see there it says Mr. Example Landlord with one property. So on the details tab, this is all the details of the landlord that we added in the wizard. And then moving on to the financial details tab, this is where obviously you will need to add in your financial details for the property, because once you start collecting rent, you need to know those financial details for your records. So the VAT status, whether they're registered, what their VAT number is, the payment date and the payment type, and the payment reference. So the first 4 letters of our company name and then rent. BDC number if you need it, amount to retain. So we're going to keep £100 from the first month's rent. We've got that as a sort of kitty really, and then the national insurance number. Whether they're a non-residential landlord and their exemption number, the overseas tax, and the option to override the default tax rate. Their last statement number, their account number and sort code, so that's their bank account number and their sort code, and the option to do a bank account lookup, which will take one of your bank account lookup credits. So you do need to buy them in bundles like text messages, but they verify that this is a valid bank account and places the information in these boxes for you. You've also got the option for BIC and SWIFT code and IBANs, and those are generally used for non-residential landlords. So at this point then you can add solicitor and accountant onto the landlord tab if you want to. If they don't have a solicitor and accountant, then you don't need to. But if, for example, you just wanted to add in a solicitor, it's a case of pressing the plus icon and adding in a contact. Now, if you've got them, you do a search for them. If you don't have them, you click add new contact down at the bottom. And again, the same with the accountant. Preferred contractors for the landlord. So this is if the landlord has a preferred contractor they like to use on all of their properties, you can add them in here, much the same as adding a preferred contractor onto a property. You've got your properties tab, so if they had multiple properties, they'd be all be sitting here on this tab, and then the events tab. So everything we've done for the landlord added onto the events tab with a date and a timestamp for compliancy reasons. So again, I've got pending changes, so I can either press the save button there or right click and save. So closing that will take us back to the tenancy, and we can go on to the tenants form. So on my applicant form then, if you open up the information panel, you can see that my applicant is now marked as inactive. So at this point, what you might need to do is set the match criteria. Just make sure that that is correct. So we have already done that. We did have a look at that doing it, but you might just want to pop in here and just make sure that it is correct. So once this tenant, or this applicant rather, starts looking for new properties, that is set properly. The own property form, if we just close the information panel down a little bit, that would have been filled in if you'd added that in the applicant wizard. Solicitors and financial services, exactly the same as the solicitor and accountancy tab on the landlord form. You just click on the plus arrow and give a search for them if you need to. Okay. References tab, so it's quite a good idea to add the references in. You don't have to, obviously, if you're not going to call on these referees again. If you've just got sort of note of the references from when you last got them for the start of this tenancy, if you then always call on the referees again fresh for each tenancy, then you might not need to add all of the details in here because they might be different ones. If you wanted to add them in at this point, you can. It's not the case of adding contacts, you just add the details in here. And the landlord referee will have pulled through from the wizard, so we added in the previous landlord there. Guarantor tab, so if this tenancy or if this applicant has a guarantor, you can add them in here, and you've also got the bank account lookup again, this time for the guarantor. Financial tab is for the financial data of the applicant, so you can add in their financial details here, ready not only for lettings financials, but also ready for when they then start going on to new tenancies and creating the new tenancy process for when they start looking again. Again, you've got the bank account lookup. Previous addresses tab, so this is where you can add all of their previous addresses if you know them, if you need to capture their details. Generally you need to have about 3 years worth of records anyway, so at this point you can add them in. So if the property is in your system, so you just do a postcode lookup. Okay, and let's say they were there for 5 years. You've also got the option there to add in a second previous address if they were there in this one for less than a year. When this tenant moves into a new property, it will move flat 1 to 3 in Westgate Street into second previous addresses and Little Queen Oak into first previous addresses, and the new property will be on the details tab. Dates, viewings and tenancies we can leave out because the tenancy is just showing the current tenancy that they're on, and the events tab is the standard events tab. So I've got some changes, so I can right click and save. So that's all of our data added, all of our data checked as well, so that it's going to be easier for us in the future once this properties are then available to let again and the applicant is again marked as active and starts looking for new properties. So all of that information is set in the system and makes our life a little bit easier moving forward. The only thing you'll need to think about then now is documentation, whether you've got copies of gas safety certificates or copies of the tenancy agreement, you can add those in. Gas safety certificates and things like that you'll probably want to add to the property. Things like the signed tenancy agreements you need to add to the tenancy. Now either way, regardless of what you're adding in and where you're adding it in, whether it's a tenancy agreement onto the tenancy or a gas safety certificate onto the property, on the events tab at the bottom you've got the option to add a new event. So on the event type you might have, for example, a safety certificate event type, or you might have a signed tenancy agreement events tab, and you can add in your information by there, or scanned documents, for example. So we'll go with scanned documents, so we'll go with the signed AST. Okay, so then you press select to go and upload your file. I don't have one, and I don't have a signed tenancy agreement, so I can't upload one. So what I'll just do is upload, for example, an example MA form. Okay, but it's a document. And then press save. So that's gone into the tenancy there with the tenancy, or with the event type rather, as signed AST. So on the property, you would click new event and add in the safety certificate under the event type of safety certificates. So that's pretty much everything we need to cover on this video to get you up and running with Expert Agent, getting your existing lettings documentation and information onto Expert Agent. The only thing you might need to think about is posting opening balances and things like that, but that is something that you will think about once you start getting up and running with lettings financials. You will need to do the lettings financial training. There's lots of training available, whether it's using the YouTube videos or whether it's doing live online training, but all of that training and support is there for you once you start using the lettings financials. So that's it for me on this video about getting your existing lettings data into Expert Agent. Thank you for watching, and I do hope you found it beneficial.